Think about this for a second. A single line, drawn in the sand, more than 100 years ago. How could a secret deal from World War I still be at the heart of so much conflict in the Middle East today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Okay, picture this. It's 2014. An ISIL fighter is on camera as a bulldozer tears down a border post between Iraq and Syria. He makes this chilling promise that this is just the beginning. And then he gives his stunt a name, the end of Sykes-Picot. Now, that's some powerful propaganda, right? It taps into a full century of anger and resentment over a deal that many people in the region will never forget.
So that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? What on earth is this Sykes-Picot conspiracy they're talking about? And, maybe more importantly, how did a map, just a simple map drawn by a couple of diplomats 100 years ago, end up becoming the blueprint for so much of the instability we see in the Middle East right now?
All right, to really get this, we've got to understand the world it came from. So let's set the stage.
Our story actually starts way back, over 100 years ago, and not in the Middle East, but in some secret room probably somewhere in Europe, right in the middle of World War I. See, the Ottoman Empire, which was this huge, sprawling power, was starting to crumble. And its enemies, well, they were already circling, figuring out how they were going to carve it up for themselves.
So the Ottoman Empire is fading, and Britain and France, they see a huge opportunity. And that brings us to the secret agreement itself, a deal that was absolutely never, ever meant for public eyes.
The main players here were what's known as the Triple Entente. That was the big World War I alliance between Great Britain, France, and the Russian Empire. And their secret talks all revolved around one big, confident assumption. They were going to win the war, and when they did, the Ottoman Empire was going to be theirs for the taking.
So they start talking in late 1915 and sign the secret deal in May of 1916. But here's the thing. It didn't stay secret for long. Just a little over a year later, bam, the Bolsheviks, the new communist revolutionaries in Russia, they take over, find these secret papers, and just leak them to the whole world. Can you imagine?
And these are the two guys at the center of it all, the architects. You've got Sir Mark Sykes for Britain and François-Georges Picot for France. Just two diplomats. You can picture them huddled over a map whose pens were about to redraw the future for millions of people, literally creating countries out of thin air.
I mean, the scale of this plan was just staggering. France was slated to get what we now know as Syria and Lebanon. Britain would get Jordan and Iraq. And Russia? They were promised the grand prize, Istanbul and the Turkish Straits. It's wild. They were literally divvying up the spoils of a war they hadn't even finished fighting yet.
Okay, but this right here is the absolute key. These lines they were drawing, they had nothing to do with the people living there. They were all about colonial interests. Who gets the best ports? Who gets the oil? They were drawn with, and this is a quote, without any regard to ethnic or sectarian characteristics. They just threw rival groups together. They split communities like the Kurds across new countries. I mean, it was a total recipe for disaster.
And this complete disregard for the local people wasn't just some oversight. It was actually just one piece of a much bigger, much messier puzzle of lies and broken promises.
Because here's the thing. At the very same time Sykes and Picot are in a room drawing up this secret map, Britain is out there making completely different promises to other groups. Why? To get them to help win the war. And yeah, this is where the story gets really tangled.
It was basically Britain's triple gamble. So, on one hand, they promised Arab leaders a huge, unified Arab state if they would just revolt against the Ottomans. On the other hand, they told the Zionist movement they'd support a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. But the secret reality? Sykes-Picot. It completely contradicted both of those promises. The real plan was always for direct French and British control.
So you can imagine what happened when the Bolsheviks leaked the whole thing. The fallout was instant. The British were, of course, super embarrassed. Their double dealing was out in the open. Their Arab allies, they felt completely betrayed, just dismayed. And the Turks? Oh, they loved it. They used it as a massive propaganda win, basically saying, see, we told you what their real colonial plans were.
But here's the crazy part. Even though the secret was out, it didn't stop the plan. Not at all. In fact, its real legacy was just getting started. And it would be a legacy of conflict that would last 100 years. So after the war ends, this secret plan becomes official policy. They basically laundered it through the new League of Nations, gave it a fancy new name, the Mandate System.
This made it all sound legitimate, giving Britain and France legal control over all these new places. The official line was that they were just, guiding them toward independence, eventually.
And just like that, the secret Sykes-Picot map became the real map. Britain was now in charge of the mandate for Palestine and the mandate for Iraq. France got the mandate for Syria and Lebanon. Those lines, the ones drawn in that secret room, were now actual, international borders enforced by European powers.
And this whole legacy, these totally artificial borders, these broken promises, it planted these deep, deep seeds of anger and resentment. You get countries like Iraq, created by jamming together totally distinct Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish groups into one place. National identity was almost non-existent, but the tensions between these groups, they were sky high. It was the perfect recipe for all the instability that was to come.
And look, this isn't just some history professor's theory. Even a former British Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw, admitted it. He said a lot of the problems we're dealing with now are, quote, a consequence of our colonial past. This isn't dusty, ancient history. Its effects are very, very real right now.
And that brings us right back to where we started. The memory of Sykes-Picot is now this incredibly powerful symbol. It stands for Western betrayal, for foreign meddling, and it gives groups like ISIL a tool to frame what they're doing, not as chaos and violence, but as them correcting a 100-year-old injustice. They're erasing that line in the sand.
So all of this leaves us with a really tough, unanswered question. For a century, people have called these borders artificial, a mistake. But as we've seen, every violent attempt to just erase them has led to absolute tragedy. So if these lines in the sand are wrong, who on earth has the right or the wisdom to draw new ones?